The highlight of the night, our presentation by Kim Young on flying squirrels. And I guess we never knew that flying squirrels could be so popular, but apparently they are. And I'm sure Kim will inspire us. Kim is a naturalist and a senior interpreter at Hidden Oaks Nature Center. She has training as a master gardener, a National Wildlife Federation habitat steward, an Audubon at Home ambassador. She has an undergraduate degree in biology from the College of William and Mary and a master's in resource policy from George Washington University. She volunteers as a Bluebird Monitor Frog Watch participant, and she's in the Creation Care Ministry. And she's very much into sustainable gardening with native plants and wildlife habitat, and of course, flying squirrels. So welcome, Kim. We really look forward to your presentation and being educated about flying squirrels.
Great. And Deborah, you're going to allow me to share my screen?
You can already do that. I made you host.
Okay, great. Let's see if we can make this work then. Right. Here we go. Is that showing?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. And I'll just mention to folks, if like me, I'm going to minimize the people over here so that you can see the slides a little bit more successfully. All right. So Glenda invited me to speak to you all today. Since we do indeed host flying squirrel programs at Hidden Oaks in Annandale during the winter months in the evening. And evening, of course, since flying squirrels are nocturnal. So we offer at Hidden Oaks Nature Center, and this is Fairfax County Park Authority, we offer both a basic program at Hidden Oaks and flying squirrel campfires for ages 4 and up. And this is not to roast the squirrels, of course. This is to roast marshmallows, not the squirrels. And as of right now, we do have spaces in programs which I just created today on March the 6th. So I've put those in specifically with the idea that some of you might be interested in getting a chance to see the flying squirrels in person. So when we end the call tonight, if you'd like, you can go into Park Takes Online and register for flying squirrels gliding in tonight on March 6th. And there's one program, I think at 7 and one program at 8. If you don't live in Fairfax County, you can still attend. I think it costs $1 or $2 more. You do have to create an account. So if you have any troubles, you won't have any trouble. It's actually very easy to do. We also offer Nature Your Way in winter at Hidden Oaks, which is an opportunity for families who want a private experience. And this can include evening opportunities to try to observe the squirrels. And starting March 1st, it'll switch over to Nature Your Way in spring at Hidden Oaks. So all of those are options for you in terms of actually getting a chance to see the squirrels. So just to give you a little flavor of what you might get to see at one of our programs, I'm going to click on this little video. And interestingly, this video was actually taken during the day when a confused or sleepy squirrel was in one of our feeding boxes. And you'll hear the naturalist say, "You're supposed to be nocturnal."
I just don't want to pinch your tail. You're nocturnal. I didn't think I'd see you in here. Oh. I'm sorry, buddy.
And there he goes. So we also occasionally offer the opportunity for families to build their own flying squirrel boxes, feeding boxes. And that's when a BSA Eagle Scout candidate puts kits together for us. So this is most likely to be available again next fall. So again, you can look for any of these opportunities on Fairfax County Park Authority's Park Takes Online. You will also note that we have human-sized flying squirrels and other wildlife who often make an appearance at special occasions at Hidden Oaks during non-COVID times, I should say, such as our Fearless Fest at Halloween, our Woodland Egg Hunt in the spring, and other family-oriented events. And in addition, for your viewing pleasure, Long Branch Nature Center in Arlington County also offers evening programs, and those are called Flying Squirrel Lore and More. So you can sign up for those on the Arlington County Park site. All right, so what exactly is a flying squirrel? They're vertebrates, of course, and they're also mammals, and they are in the rodent family. The family name, Sciuridae, comes from a Greek word meaning shade tail. And being a nocturnal squirrel, the tail doesn't offer any shade for flying squirrels, just for the diurnal or daytime active squirrels. They're the ones that get that shade effect. Northern flying squirrels, Glaucomys sabrinus, and southern flying squirrels, Glaucomys volans, are the two main native flying squirrel species found in North America. And there's also numerous subspecies in both of those categories. The southern flying squirrel is found throughout the eastern United States, from Maine south to Florida, and as far west as Minnesota and Texas. The northern flying squirrel has a bit more of a patchy distribution. It's found primarily in the Northeast, along the West Coast, and into Idaho and Montana. But for our purposes tonight, we're going to be focusing on the southern flying squirrel, since that's the one that lives in our area here. And you can see up in the upper right-hand corner, they have many common names as well. Some of you may remember one of the original flying squirrels. They're on the right-hand side, Rocky from Rocky and Bullwinkle cartoons. Those of you with Pokemon-loving children or grandchildren may know Emolga, the Pokemon sky squirrel. He's pretty cool. All right, so the southern flying squirrel is actually a species of least concern from a conservation standpoint. In fact, there may be as many flying squirrels in our environment as gray squirrels. We just don't notice them because they're nocturnal and they're arboreal up in the trees. So no overall population estimates are currently available. Populations in certain areas, though, do suffer from habitat loss, and that would be a sort of a combination of a loss of cavity-bearing and nut-producing trees that are obviously an important part of their habitat. Interestingly, flying squirrels are also the oldest living line of modern squirrels. They made their first appearance about 30 million years ago. They're not, though, very well represented in the fossil record, and that's for two reasons. One is their fine bone structure doesn't fossilize well, and also due to their arboreal lifestyle, dead specimens were rarely situated so that fossilization could occur. So as mammals, flying squirrels have fur, and both North American species are gray-brown, and for the southern flying squirrel, the belly fur is all white. The southern species is a little bit smaller, about 8 to 10 inches in length, and you can see on the right here this diurnal gray squirrel pelt. They're both very similar in color, since both species camouflage against tree trunks. And you can see the little crayons we have there. Many of our flying squirrel programs are oriented towards kids, so we want to show them that there's a real variety of color in a squirrel's pelt. And again, it's represented by what a tree trunk might look like. So as rodents, flying squirrels are part of the largest group of mammals. And this includes rats, mice, voles, muskrats, nutria, guinea pigs, chinchillas, lemmings, hamsters, gerbils, beavers, capybaras, muskrats, porcupines, woodchucks, chipmunks, prairie dogs, marmots, chinchillas, voles, lemmings, and more. And rodents comes from the Latin meaning to gnaw. And so they're characterized by a single pair of continuously growing incisors or front teeth in each of the upper and lower jaws. And then the coloring in their enamel, it includes a pigment that consists of the mineral iron. So this pigment is the cause of that orange color that you're seeing in the beaver skull and the gray squirrel skull. I didn't actually have a flying squirrel skull. They're quite small. So the iron gives the teeth a tougher and firmer texture, which enables the smoother portions on the back to grind down more rapidly. And all of this ends up giving the teeth a real chisel-like form that helps them greatly when they're gnawing. So flying squirrels, as you might imagine, have very small mouths. So how do they grab onto large, hard, smooth, and round objects like nuts? For example, after cutting an acorn from its branchlet, they will hold and rotate the nut in their forepaws, determining by weight and sound whether the nut is good or whether it's been attacked by a moth larva. If it passes that test, the hungry squirrel will then cut notches into the skin of the acorn so that it can bite into it strongly enough to be able to glide away with this little prize in its mouth. Now, if the acorn has a moth larva inside, rather than drop it to the ground dismissively as you might expect, the flying squirrel will probably simply open it on the spot and chow down on the larva, because in fact, insects are their favorite food. So their careful way of opening hard nuts is so unique that you can determine a flying squirrel's presence in the area by examining the nut meat shells found on the forest floor. So each nut is opened in the same manner. If you look over at that little picture on the right-hand side, they have one opening only. The cut is smooth with no jagged edges, and only flying squirrels open nuts this way. Deer mice create several smaller, irregular shaped holes to get at the nut meat, and gray squirrels, as you all have seen, they just completely rip the nut to pieces. So flying squirrels have 22 teeth compared to our human 32, and they're not just for eating. They'll use their teeth to hold on to food while gliding or running, to groom fellow squirrels, to pound food into crevices for storage, to strip bark from trees for nesting material, pick up young pups, and less often for defense. And what's being eaten with these teeth? So flying squirrels are considered omnivores, but they're also considered one of the most carnivorous of all of the squirrel species. And you can see there insects, spiders, slugs, snails, bird eggs, nestlings, and even carrion during the winter months. So flying squirrels are generally scatter hoarders, although they may use larder cavities, and these are like large natural cavities in trees. Once they've located a food item, they'll either eat it on the spot or find a suitable location to store it in order to retrieve it at a later time. So the flying squirrel might store things again on crevices and tree branches, in natural cavities, in shallow digs under the forest floor, and under logs. And sometimes at night, you can even hear the bonk, 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 bonk of a flying squirrel using its front teeth in order to press a nut into the tree bark. So flying squirrels mark every storable piece of food with chemicals from glands in their lips. And in one experiment, nuts were taken from a feeding station, nuts that had been taken from a feeding station and stored by a flying squirrel were retrieved by a researcher and returned to the feeding station. The flying squirrel subsequently ignored those returned nuts, as in the squirrel's mind, they had already been stored. So in this same researcher, it suggested that one squirrel could possibly store as many as 15,000 nuts in a season. He also determined that changing photo periods or daily amounts of light determined when the squirrels would begin their nut stashing. So by decreasing or increasing the amount of light, he found that their hoarding activity, followed suit. Less light meant more hoarding, more light meant less hoarding. And in the wild, of course, this makes sense. The lessening amount of light each day would tell the squirrel that winter is on its way. Everybody back to the regular screen? Hopefully so.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. So flying squirrels don't really fly. You hear that word, it's part of their name, and you heard that in the videos. At least it's not what we call powered flight, which involves flapping. So we always ask the kids at the programs, are there any mammals that actually use powered flight? And their answer would be bats. And other animals have powered flight as well, obviously our birds and also our insects. So other animals like flying squirrels, though, glide. And this particular type of gliding is called a gravitational gliding as opposed to soaring. So as we saw in the video, the flying squirrels have developed this unique adaptation called a patagium between their fore and hind legs. And underneath the skin of the patagium are long, thin muscle groups which control the movement and hold the skin flaps in various degrees of tautness as required during the glide. And when not gliding, another group of muscles controls the now loose skin, keeping it out of the way when the squirrel is running, walking, and sitting. So when a flying squirrel wants to travel to another tree without touching the ground, it launches itself from a high branch or even from the trunk of the tree and spreads out its limbs so the patagium is exposed. And then they use those slight movements of the legs that you could see in the videos to steer. Flying squirrels can cover more than 150 feet in a single glide. And one source indicated that the longest glide of a southern flying squirrel was 250 feet, which is almost as long as a football field. So The tail of the flying squirrel serves as a balancing organ, similar to the tail of a kite. And this is sort of like stabilizing the squirrel in midair and also sort of as an airfoil when braking for a landing. It can also assist in balance when running along precarious routes, such as thin branches, or that might be moving with the wind, and also when browsing on the outer reaches for fruit, flowers, and buds and things like that. So, and as with its cousin, the gray squirrel, the position of the flying squirrel's tail can also provide clues to its health, its hierarchy within the group, and also its emotional state. So a young flying squirrel will keep its tail down somewhat in the presence of an older squirrel, and a really angry squirrel will flick its tail in tandem with alarm calls. One of the most interesting things is that the flying squirrel's tail can also be passively employed in escaping the grasp of a predator's teeth or talons. So flying squirrels have breakaway tails. Should a predator attack and grab a flyer's tail, the tail will actually come off. And the sight of a flying squirrel with half a tail or no tail at all is not really an uncommon sight. The affected squirrel can make adjustments to this loss and can live a normal life afterwards. So thanks to its superb gliding abilities, flying squirrels are great escape artists. Once a flying squirrel lands on a tree trunk following a flight, it immediately scurries to the other side of the trunk to avoid predators that may have followed it. Even so, owls, hawks, tree snakes, foxes, and feral cats are common predators. And one issue is that despite being arboreal and living mainly in trees, the flying squirrel does have to come to the ground for water. You can imagine with nuts and insects being two of your primary food sources, those don't have too much liquid in them. And they require about the equivalent of a jigger of water a day, and they may also forage on the ground as necessary. So the squirrel's fur provides great camouflage, and when it detects the presence of a predator, its first instinct will be to remain stock still and not make a sound, in the hopes that the predator will not be able to zero in on its location. The most dangerous time in a squirrel's life is when it's a juvenile or teenager. They're inexperienced with predators, they don't know their environment quite as well, and they probably take more risks, just like all of us experience with our own teenagers. Because it has eyes on the side of its head, it's difficult for a flying squirrel to judge how far away a predator may be until it's too late. And so through a combination of running, jumping, and gliding, the squirrel attempts to get to a refuge as quickly as it can before being attacked. And as with other nocturnal animals, flying squirrels have large eyes to allow maximum light in, and their eyes, as well as the rest of their face, are protected and adapted with several sets of vibrissae or whiskers or tactile hairs. Complex nerve bundles under the skin are attached to each hair bulb and send tactile information for the squirrel to their brain. So the main set of whiskers are on a flying squirrel's face for the ones on the either side of their nose are the longest for any squirrel of their size. They have the two sets on either side of their nose. They have another shorter set above the eyes and below the eyes. And then they have additional vibrissae on their lower jaw and also on their forepaws. And the ones on the forepaws would help them to feel their way in dark holes, and also to manage their food. And their facial muscles help those vibrissae to move in a forward position. You may have even been able to see that in one of the videos, to help protect the squirrel's eyes as they land on a tree. So other adaptations to the arboreal lifestyle include the flying squirrel's feet. So like all squirrels, they have 4 toes on the front and 5 toes on the back. Their claws are very sharp and they're not retractable. And this is really important their claws are really important for good launches, for grabbing vertical landing points like trees, obviously, running along branches and digging. And what's fun about their hind feet is they're articulated in a way to make them capable of great rotation. So the squirrel can walk down tree trunks upside down with its hind feet rotated almost 180 degrees from the forward facing position. We probably have all seen cats that wish they could do that. The feet also play an important role in scent marking and in performing what's been called a war dance. This would be the alternate stamping of feet when the squirrel is agitated, particularly if there's a predator near where it wants to go. While the squirrel's front paws are really sensitive for food handling, the hind legs and feet are extremely powerful for their size, and this is really critical to their ability to launch, pushing them up, out, and away from their launch site. So flying squirrels are the most social of all North America's squirrel species. They don't hibernate, they're active year-round, and they're unique among squirrels in that they come together or aggregate during the cold winter months for biothermal regulation. So by grouping together, the flying squirrels can stay active all winter and keep warm during the day inside thick-walled snag trees. These holes in trees are their main dwellings. They'll also use deserted woodpecker holes, abandoned nests of birds and other squirrels, as well as, unfortunately for some people, human-made dwellings and bird boxes. And while groups of up to 50 have been recorded, the average number is usually about 10 to 20. When it's really cold, southern flying squirrels can enter a state of torpor or physical inactivity, and this would be when temperatures, hopefully not around here, are about a negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. In the hotter summer months, abandoned gray squirrel drays may be used, and I love that a group of flying squirrels is called a scurry. I think that's a very cute name for a group. All right, during the reproductive season, females, or does as they're called, are known to be highly territorial, and they'll fiercely defend their territories. Since males, or bucks, it's hard to imagine a little squirrel like this being called a buck, but they are. The bucks don't care for the young and typically leave before the litter is born. And this may mean that either one male mates with multiple females, or both males and females have multiple mates. Southern flying squirrels have 2 breeding seasons per year from January to April, so we're in that now, and another from June to August. Their gestation period lasts about 40 days, and they have an average of 2 to 3 kits per litter. They're weaned as early as 6 to 9 weeks, and the young gain independence at about 3 to 4 months. Flying squirrels can live about 10 years in captivity, but usually live about half that in the wild. One interesting recent discovery is that southern flying squirrels glow pink under UV light. So John Martin, a biologist, was in his backyard with a UV flashlight when a hot pink squirrel flew by. And further research confirmed and showed that other species of flying squirrels turn pink in UV light as well. It's still a little unclear why. It might be that the bright pink color has evolved to confuse owls who prey on the squirrels, because owls actually fluoresce in the same hue themselves. And that might make a flying squirrel look, superficially at least, like a flying owl. Or if scientists determine that the squirrels themselves see UV light, it may have some sort of mating or signaling function, similar to what has evolved in some birds and fish. Or honestly, my favorite theory is that it's just good fun for an animal which looks like it's having a great time despite its short, risk-filled life. So the main role of southern flying squirrels in the local ecosystem is seed dispersal. So these little rodents act as key seed dispersers of not only hardwood trees, but also the fruiting bodies of subterranean fungi, which they feed upon. So they disperse the fungi spores through their feces. The fungi mycelia are thought to be highly beneficial for tree growth and maintenance due to their association with the tree roots. All right, so how do we attract flying squirrels at the Nature Center, and how can you attract them at home? If you have large mast or nut producing trees on your property, or if you've seen evidence of flying squirrels like the gnawed acorn that we saw earlier, you may want to put up a feeding box. At my house, this is my backyard, we have a feeding box on the deck railing. Now this is a little bit unusual, and this is because our backyard drops off very steeply down below, and so it would be too hard for us to put a box on a tree. We wouldn't be able to see it very easily. So we have it up on the deck railing, and it has worked pretty successfully. If you're reasonably quiet, you can open these boxes and watch the squirrel or squirrels inside. Sorry about these somewhat blurry pictures. We put out our box only during the winter months of November through March, since this is when the squirrels have the least other available food, such as their favorite insects, and therefore they're more likely to seek out our peanut-filled box. This is also because the gray squirrels will love your box as well, And although they can't get inside the opening, they'll chew the box to death trying. So you can see in that picture on the right that the gray squirrels do a lot of damage to your box during the day. Your box will last a lot longer if you only put it out for a few months each year. All right, at Hidden Oaks Nature Center, we have multiple feeding boxes as well as higher nesting boxes, which scouts have installed. We don't tend to the high nesting boxes, but we see the squirrels running in and out of them, especially from the feeding boxes below. And a couple notes about the boxes. The electrical plate you see there on the left-hand side around the opening helps to keep the gray squirrels from chewing the opening to make it larger so they can get in. And a fancier latch that you see pictured there in the center will also help to keep raccoons and deer. As you can see, we have a lot of deer right behind the nature center. It will help to keep them from clearing out your box. And metal on the bottom, as you can see in that right-hand picture, reduces the likelihood that woodpeckers will make holes in the bottom to make the nuts that you're putting in fall out before the squirrels get them. On the left, you can see one of our volunteers at Hidden Oaks loading up the boxes. We put in both peanuts in the shell as well as sunflower seed. And then you can see in the center there, our naturalist, Emily, is checking the box. She's using a flashlight with red cellophane. This allows you to see without ruining your night vision. And red light, of course, is less intrusive to most nocturnal animals. And here you can see Emily again checking the box. And it's pretty common at dusk and dawn to see these little guys inside the box. Sometimes, I don't know if you could tell from the picture, we'll also smear a little bit of peanut butter on the inside of the door, and the scent also helps to attract them. On nights when we don't get to see the squirrels, we do have some carved into our woodland wildlife chainsaw tree sculpture. And also on our Winged Wonders wall. This is on the side of the Nature Center building where kids can compare their sizes to some flying and gliding animals. So some of you may have certified your yard as an Audubon at-home wildlife sanctuary. This program is a little different from other certification programs in that you certify that you have at least 10 sanctuary species using your space for feeding, living, or raising young. And one of those species that's considered a sanctuary species is indeed the southern flying squirrel. So as a result, Audubon at Home has a really nice two-sided flyer that you can download from their website, which gives you a lot of information about how you can help flying squirrels. You can see in the green on the left how you can help. So this might be something that you'll want to print out and take a look at. We know that one of the best things you can do to attract native wildlife is to plant native plants. And there's so many resources online and in book form to help you do that. So I've got a picture of some of my favorites here, but I imagine that many of you are also into native plants and based on your activities also in removing invasives. So I want to, again, thank Glenda and Deborah for inviting me to speak. Because my work at, or between my work at Hidden Oaks and my addiction to native plants and wildlife habitat, I'm involved in a lot of different activities related to wildlife and habitat considerations. But flying squirrels, I have to say, are such a charismatic species. They are probably the cutest little mammal I've ever seen. And even though, again, they're not of concern from a conservation point of view, I think that they're just an animal that we all want to know about and have the opportunity to see, because it really just reminds you what an incredible world we have. So I am going to stop sharing here, and then if you all have questions, I'm going to turn it over to Deborah.
We have quite a few in chat, so let's start there. Let me see, let me go back up to the top because I don't want to miss anybody's questions. Sorry. Let me go up. So let me see, sorry about that.
That's okay. I'm looking as well.
I was trying to scroll up. We think we have both southern and northern squirrels. Is that possible? They come every night to eat at a feeder outside our bedroom. They hang on the window screen and we are amazed they don't tear up the screen.
Yes, interestingly, that was one of the first ways that my husband George and I realized that we had flying squirrels was at night. They would land on the screen, and of course they're landing, really spread-eagled with that white counter-shaded belly, and so I'm not surprised. And yeah, I think they're so lightweight. I think that's probably one of the reasons that they're not tearing up your screen too much. In terms of having both northern and southern, I thought I was pretty sure that we only have southern in this area, but someone else may want to contradict that. I think I'd have to do a little bit more research. I assumed, like I say, that we just had southern, so I'm not absolutely sure about that.
And that actually wasn't the first one. The first question was from Paula, and she says, I live across the street from a park, and I need the gray squirrels and chipmunks on my front stoop with a combination of blackbird seed and corn. They also love shelled walnuts and peanuts. Is this diet okay for them? Some of them come to my front stoop every day. As soon as they know I have opened up the front door, they wait in the side garden to see if I will put out food. I buy this food combo at Weber's Pet Market.
So there's probably a lot of differing opinions about that from those of you who are on the Zoom. And we feed the flying squirrels at the Nature Center in order to attract them to our programs. I don't see any harm. We feed birds and so forth. So I think as long as you're using a high grade food, and of course, in terms of the nuts you're selecting, you want to make sure things are unsalted. You definitely don't want to have things that have salt in them. So I think as long as you're keeping safe and, in terms of not trying to handle them since they are wild animals, I mean, personally, I'm okay with that. I don't know if that really answered your question, but I think it's okay. Someone else may disagree with me, and I'm open to that as well.
Next question is, do the chemicals secreted from their lips help them find the nuts they have hidden?
Yes, it certainly does. It certainly does. And that's not unusual in animal species that they, use some sort of chemicals secreted from their lips or from their feet in order to mark the nuts and make it possible for them to find again. I thought that study where they found that once the squirrel had marked and hidden a nut, if the researcher collected that nut and put it back in the feeding station, the squirrel would not hide it again because in their mind, it's marked, it's already hidden. So, clearly they're not super smart to not realize what's going on there exactly. But yes, so that does help them to find the nuts again.
The next question is, I'm on 120 acres of forest at the base of the Maine Blue Ridge in rural Greene County. I work in these woods dozens of hours per month and have never seen one. Could you provide me with strategies to see them?
Well, first of all, I'm jealous, Jim. That sounds absolutely wonderful. So it is tricky. So the best time to see them is about an hour after dusk and an hour before dawn, although you might see them for an extended period in the evening. A couple of things to keep in mind. They prefer times when the visibility is not as good. In other words, when you have a full moon, remember they're concerned about predators, particularly owls. So they would rather there was very little moon, maybe a little drizzle. So kind of a gray night is going to be a better time to see them than a bright night when it might be, we might be happier about going out. The reason that we see them so commonly at Hidden Oaks is, again, in part because we put the boxes out and that draws them in. Remember that for most of the year, they are very happy living a wonderful arboreal nocturnal lifestyle way up high in the trees, and there's just highly unlikely that we would see them. It's really just in the winter when we're able to bring them down into our viewing area by putting these peanuts and seed and peanut butter into these boxes. Again, in your yard, We did see them a couple of times landing on a porch screen. We did see the nuts on the ground, so we knew they were in the area, and that's when we decided to put the box up. So you shouldn't be surprised that you haven't seen them. I would almost guarantee that they're there. And now that you know a little bit more about them, you know, try to take more walks at that time of night with your flashlight with the red cellophane and shine it in and up and around your large nut producing trees.
The next one is, how can you make sure the squirrels won't get into the attic when helping to support them in our yard?
It's so funny that you asked that, because I actually had a link I was going to put up. This seemed like the best article on that topic. I know a lot of people are not too happy about flying squirrels because of that exact issue. The important thing is to try to make sure that there's no way for them to get in, and that may require an expert to come out and really search around your roof and your eaves and make sure, because remember, these are very small animals, make sure that there's no openings for them to get in. I looked at a couple of websites that talked about, you know, what to do once you've gotten them. And of course, depends on the kind of pest service that you look up. But ideally, what you can have done is to have, once you've had someone identify that it is indeed flying squirrels that you have, they can put in, I've forgotten what they're called, but they're these doors where they're one way only, so that once they go out at night, they can't get back in. You want to make sure that all of the squirrels, including any potential young, are out of there before you go in and then seal all of your openings. So really, it's just all about openings in your house that you don't know about, and trying to be, you know, humane in terms of allowing them all to get out before you seal them up.
Hey, is the purpose of artificial boxes to provide food or nuts, or do flying squirrels use boxes as shelter and or to give birth and rear young? Do you primarily install boxes for education or to help the local population? Do you conduct surveys to get an estimate of the local population? If so, what kind of surveys?
Great questions. So it is primarily for educational purposes, but it depends a little bit on your local area. So, you know, in some areas, people are very quick to remove snags. And snags, as we know, are real animal hotels. You know, many animals make their home in snags, and they're softer, so woodpeckers are able to create, you know, holes and so forth. So at Hidden Oaks, we're a relatively small, we have 50 acres there. And we try to leave snags up as much as possible for wildlife habitat, but sometimes they're near a trail, or they're near a building, or they're considered dangerous. And so many of those kinds of trees do end up having to come down. So I think, you know, for the most part, our boxes are there for educational purposes, again, so that we can bring the squirrels in close to the building at a nighttime, in a nighttime setting where people can actually get a chance to see the squirrels. But I like to think that they also do provide some, you know, actual habitat for them. We see those squirrels running up and down the trees from the feeding boxes up into those high nesting boxes. And so I do believe that there are squirrels aggregating in there. Once the female becomes pregnant, though, she would leave those boxes and she would need to go elsewhere into a spot where she would be able to birth and raise her kits. And in terms of the surveys, we did have a scout, an Eagle Scout, do some surveying. He wanted to see, you know, do they prefer a certain kind of nut, and what time of the evening do they come out? And so he did some pretty interesting surveys and discovered that, you know, the majority of the ones we were seeing were, you know, in January and February, about an hour to 2 hours after sunset. Unfortunately, we had, you know, I showed you that chainsaw art tree. That was a tree that had to come down because it was struck by lightning. And it was really the primary launching and landing point for the flying squirrels around Hidden Oaks Nature Center. So when it got transferred from a 100-foot tulip poplar to a short chainsaw art tree, we lost quite a lot of the population for a while during his surveys. So that's the only surveys that have been done, but I think it would be fun. And there may be some that have been done in other parts of the country, but I'm not familiar with them. There don't seem to be very many population estimates when you try to do research, and I think maybe that indicates that not much work has been done in that area.
Our home in Herndon backs to woods. I feed birds on the deck and have seen flying squirrels on the deck feeding on seeds. Their eyes are amazing. We have put up a flying squirrel nest box, and I'm not sure there's a question, but that's this.
Yes, terrific. That is so fun. Once you know they're there, it just really makes you want to see them as often as possible because they're so cute. You know, and having one thing I wanted to point out, keep in mind that if you do decide, if you determine that your yard is suitable for a nesting box, meaning you have large trees that, you know, and some of them are nut producing, you do have to be patient. So you might put up your box and not see any flying squirrels for an entire season, or sadly, even more than one season. But most of the time they will come eventually, again, if you do have the right habitat. So don't get discouraged. That, you know, it takes, just like other animals, it takes time for them to discover your habitat and know that it's safe. So be patient.
And the next comment is, we had one on our screen too. Do you have a link or PDF for flying squirrel boxes based on your recommendation, or flying squirrel box plans?
Yes, if you Google flying squirrel box plans, you will find there's quite a few out there. Excuse me. I don't have any particular recommendations in terms of where to get your plan, but there are a couple of things that I'll mention. Do be sure that you put one of those electrical plate things over the opening so that the gray squirrels don't you know, chew and make that opening larger. Also, any other place on your flying squirrel box that you can put metal, if you're handy, like I say, on the bottom, on the edges, you'll reduce the wear and tear from those pesky gray squirrels who will chew on them during the day. Also, you want to try to, when you are making your box, think about where you want to put it so that you can access it in order to be able to put the seed or nuts or whatever in there, and also so that you can see it. So that's certainly a consideration. And then you want the hole, the opening, to be nearest the tree. So, you know, when you think about birdhouses, usually your hole is right smack in the middle of the one side. But with flying squirrel boxes, the hole is on one side or the other, whichever side is going to be closest to the tree. Because when they come in, they're going to try to get in there as fast as possible because of, you know, concerns about predators.
Next question is, do flying squirrels interbreed with other squirrel species?
I've never heard that they do. I would think that that would be pretty unlikely due to pretty substantial difference in size, and also such differences in habits, since gray squirrels are, you know, diurnal, active during the day, and flying squirrels are nocturnal. So I've not ever heard of that. It's a good question.
Next comment is one other question. Earlier you said that flying squirrels were a species of least concern. Do you know if that is for the state, or does that include other states where they may be found?
Good question. I got the impression that that was sort of generally for both the northern and southern flying squirrels. I think, again, it probably depends a lot on you know, individual habitats. In other words, you know, some areas have just a lot of ideal flying squirrel habitat. In other areas, more of that habitat is being destroyed. So the impression I got from the reading I did was that in some cases there's some local concern, but that overall it's a species of least concern from a conservation standpoint. I mean, I think anything that we can do to try to make sure that we're leaving our, you know, adequate habitat of large trees, and again of snags, you know, is important. And the snags, of course, are not only providing homes for the squirrels, but we also know that they're wonderful breeding areas for insects, and that's their primary favorite diet.
Next comment is, I have seen flying squirrels regularly at my bird feeders at night. I have 2 large trees, but I'm not in a wooded area. Are they living in my trees or traveling on the ground to get to my yard?
I am guessing that they are traveling from those. I wonder, you know, it's a little hard to tell without seeing your yard how far away other trees are beyond the 2 that are in your yard. They want to avoid being down on the ground as much as possible because that is certainly much more dangerous. So I would think that it would be more likely that they would be gliding in. And, you know, when you think about it, they have to go way up high in a tree in order to glide to the next tree, because although they can achieve some slight difference in elevation, you know, gliding mostly involves going from high to low. So depending a little bit on where your bird feeder is and so forth, I would think they would be gliding in, but it's a little hard to say for sure.
And the next one is, what kind of nuts or seeds do they like the most?
Good question. When our scout did his stuff, he found that they weren't too particular. He was trying some rather pricey nuts, and we determined they didn't really care about the price of the nuts. So I think you could go relatively inexpensive. We just buy the big bags of peanuts in the shell. We just make sure that they're not salted. But interestingly, you could even just have, you know, kids or grandkids collect acorns and put them in there. I think the nice thing for the squirrels is just that it's a safe environment. They don't have to work so hard to collect things. And so I don't think they're particular. Our volunteer at the Nature Center, who has been stocking the boxes for us during COVID, has been putting in black sunflower seed and peanuts, and the squirrels seem very, very happy. The only other thing I'd mention about that is some of the box plans, the feeding box plans, have holes in the bottom. I think the idea is for drainage, but just remember that your nuts and your seeds will also drain out of those holes. So you don't want to make the holes in the bottom too big, or I'm not even convinced really that you need holes in the bottom of the box. If your roof is sturdy, it shouldn't get, you know, full of water. But do think about, you know, how your box is built and what you can afford to keep up with in terms of, and you only need to put the food in right before the evening, if that's a convenient time for you. Your crazy gray squirrels won't be quite as upset about trying to get into it all day if you haven't stocked it first thing in the morning.
Does the density of the woods make a difference for gliding needs?
That is a good question. I haven't read that it does. They definitely prefer things like oaks and hickories, and probably, you know, those trees are sort of self-selecting in terms of how many can grow in the woods, you know, beyond the sapling stage. So I haven't read that the density makes too much difference, but I would think that the kind of habitat that they would like would have a tendency to have some distance between the trees. Yeah, that would be something worth researching. They, as you saw in one of those videos, they seem quite adept at negotiating turns and so forth. I've heard quite a lot of different information. I've heard that they can make 180-degree turns. That seems pretty amazing. I would be surprised to actually see that happen, but you know, certainly curving paths would allow them to miss trees that are close together. And we know their eyes are huge, and they do, when you can see the little bodies really wiggling back and forth in order to land where they want to land. They're pretty amazing.
That's the last question in our chat, but if other people want to ask questions, you are certainly welcome to turn your camera on and microphone and do so. You could raise your hand or whatever works best for you.
I'm not looking at the view of all the people. Let's see, just in case anybody has. Here's a gallery view.
Yeah.
Everybody's pretty much not being seen right this second. Oh, some people, some bodies are showing up. Well, I didn't get a chance to say this at the beginning, but my husband and I do hike at Dyke Marsh periodically. I was on your website prior to this presentation, and it's just such a wonderful and amazing group, and the work that you do and the programs that you offer. really, I really appreciate being invited. And again, keep in mind, I did put in those 2 new programs for March 6th. Because of COVID, we are limited in the number of people who can attend our programs at one time. So it's basically 24 spaces on that night. If you, would love to have some of you come and let me know that you were from the Friends of Dyke Marsh or from this Zoom presentation. But we'll have loads more of those programs starting up again in November. And hopefully sometime over the year, also more opportunities to come to the Nature Center and actually build a flying squirrel box with one of our kits, which is a whole lot easier than having to saw all the wood and buy all the pieces yourself. So do watch for those as well.
Well, this is Glinda Booth. Whoops, something just went wrong.
Nope, you're fine.
Okay, well, vanished from my screen, but okay, I'm back. Sorry.
You're fine, Glenda.
I'm sorry. I stuck my thumb on the screen. Thank you, Kim. That was wonderful. I mean, it was very, very informative. I think most of us knew very little about flying squirrels, and so we got a real education. And we can talk about this later, but maybe you can do a walk with us in Dyke Marsh and we can look for them one night.
Woohoo!
We
That would be
understand
crazy.
they're there, but there are no boxes or anything. But
Yeah,
we can discuss that later. But
sounds good.
yeah, thank you so much. That was really
right.
terrific.
Well, thank you. Thank all of you who were on tonight. And again, I don't really consider myself an expert from lots of personal research, but once you know they're there and once you've seen them, you are very quickly addicted because they're very charismatic little creatures.
Well, we can tell. You sound like a real expert to us.
Thanks.
Okay, I don't think there's anything else unless somebody else has something they want to bring up. I see some applause going on.
There's lots of thank yous in the chat.
Oh,
Yep.
good. Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's supposed
All
to
right. Good night, everybody.
Middle of the night, so be careful tomorrow morning.
Yes, be safe. Good night.
Night.
Thank you, Deborah.
My pleasure.
Yes, thank you, Deborah and Glenda.
Good night, Kim. Thank you.
Good night. Thanks for having me.